Before starting this video, I'd like to clarify that this is all my personal opinion. Um, you're entitled to your opinion, obviously, and this is no hate towards certain political ideologies um, or anything like that. Like I said, this is strictly my opinion. Um, and if you feel like you might get offended watching this video, we're not going to discuss anything crazy, but it is opinionated. And if you feel as though you're going to get offended watching this video, or if you get triggered easily by certain views, I recommend clicking off. Excuse the voice track. I'd recommend clicking off. So, in my last video, I went over a kind of brief overview and history of the American public education system, how we got our public education system in the first place, kind of how it evolved in the early ages with John D. Rockefeller funding a bunch of the programs and kind of using it as a training ground for college and work in the factories. And, I just gave the history. I kind of gave some of my opinion on it, but just giving the facts about what happened and how we got to where we are today. Obviously, I could have gone through a lot more of the education system, the college rise, post World War II, and things like that. So this video is going to be more so my personal issues with the current day public school system and maybe just school system in general, more so directed towards public schools. And like I said, 100% my opinion, but I think this video will provide some value, some insight, and maybe make someone realize that, like, okay, there's other people who think this, and it's not just me. I'm not an outlier. um you know so let's get into it. So my first issue is that I think education is feminized. I think it is inherently feminine. I think education should kind of be indifferent, and that's my personal take, but it does lean more towards kind of the feminine. You're forced to sit down for north of 8 hours a day most of the time. And look, men just inherently want to move around, like when you're younger. And this is a whole other topic, but you know, they have kids, boys in elementary, we moving around, jumping around, and when they're supposed to sit down, and then these kids will get diagnosed with ADHD or something else like that. I'm not going to deny that ADHD does probably, I mean, it does exist. I think it's overdiagnosed personally, and that's maybe the first hot take in this video of many. And I think it is overdiagnosed because, look, these kids just want to be active. These kids just have high energy. These are actually probably the best, most physically capable boys, probably the most intelligent. If you really measure them by, their knowledge and their ability to gain knowledge and, their ability to infer certain things, these kids are probably smarter than the kids who sit down and be quiet for 8 hours a day in elementary school. They're just capable boys who get diagnosed with ADHD and put on medication of some sort. I'm not going to go all there, but I think women are just, I don't want to say, I mean, they're more docile in general. And I don't want to say more sedentary. I think women, just human beings, should move around a lot, but it's easier for them to kind of gain that system of just having to sit down, they're going to learn, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But I think for men, it's kind of an issue. I think we need to be moving around. I think we need to have physical activity. And the fact that, at least in my high school, you only need to take one semester of a gym class, I think is kind of, it reflects the modern day approach to physical fitness for young people and people in general, where it's just kind of put on the back burner over other things. And obviously, there's probably seasons of your life where fitness isn't going to be the number one driver and the number one thing that gets you out of bed. But I think every semester, I think there should be 4 credits of physical fitness. Honestly, I do think that, or at least one, at least a year. Where so for our school, you do personal fitness. So you do like 1/4 of running, then 1/4 of swimming. I think there should be a weight training um semester too. And I think there should honestly be maybe a physical fitness elective after that. It's my take, but so yeah, it's kind of creating a system where you have to be sat down all day. You have to ask to use the bathroom. I think this gets overlooked. I think it's so dumb. I think it's so dumb how you have to get asked to use, or how you have to ask to use the bathroom, and you only get a limited number of bathroom passes or whatever that may be. And obviously, I see where they're coming from, because there's kids who will go to the bathroom, and they'll smoke or vape in the bathroom, or they'll get in a fight, or maybe they'll just roam around the school, and that's those people make it bad for everyone else. Of course, I understand that, but I think it's so stupid. I think you should really honestly be able to tell the teacher, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the bathroom," and if you're gonna do something stupid instead of go to the bathroom, that's on you. You're almost a grown man. You know what I mean? So honestly, if that's your decision, that should just be your decision. That's on you. Um, I think maybe I talked about this. I want to talk about this, I think, in the next video. Um, Part three of this, the final part. But I think that's going to weed out some of just the below average, like normies that the school system tries to adapt to. Because this is one thing I'll get into later on, is that the school system always has to adapt to the lowest group of people in terms of intelligence, ability to work hard, ambition, things like that. They always have to dumb themselves down to that. I'll get into that later. They have to ask to use the bathroom, even in a generic white collar workplace setting where you have, when you're in a meeting, at least from what I've heard, you can just get up and go to the bathroom. You don't have to ask your boss to go to the bathroom at a professional workplace. And school always talks about, we're getting you ready for the real world. This isn't the real world, dude. You can go to the bathroom whenever you want in the real world. It just shows they're trying, to kind of just beat you down and make you, best way I can put it, submissive. And it's so subtle, but these subtle things, just like with bad habits, if you scroll for 10 minutes, first thing you do when you wake up, and you kind of eat a crappy breakfast, and you do this, and that, those on their own aren't necessarily going to ruin you. When you stack everything together, now, you're kind of screwed. And this is the same thing with school. Having to sit down like all day and just listen to teacher teach you, whatever kind of twisted facts, garbage they want to give you. Um, and then having to ask to go to the bathroom, and then you need your little hall pass. You can't go on any different floor, at least at my school. Um, all of this. You got to put your phone in a little cubby. I kind of get that more than others. I don't know. I think it's you have to just memorize. School's just all about memorization. You just memorize facts, and then once you graduate, you probably retain 10 to 20% of what you learn, and it's probably not even going to be useful. Stack all those things together, and you got a recipe for disaster, absolute disaster. That's my personal take. Another thing you have to do is conform. I'm not going to say to liberal ideologies. I think liberal, um, I don't like the word nowadays, and this is my take. I don't like the word nowadays because I think when like someone says liberal, you think, they're kind of Republican normie, um, which I'm not. I'm not really. I don't align politically, to be honest. I don't really align politically. I think politics is, you know, all of kind of a show nowadays. But we do have to conform to progressive ideologies, and this is where I have an issue. The progressive ideologies, where we're always making progress. We're always trying to move forward and be better and have a good outlook for the future, which is great. And obviously, yeah, we should always be trying to kind of improve society. But when we think of progressive, I think we think of certain movements, certain, I guess, woke, I don't know, it's the best way I can put it, woke ideologies, and they get shoved down your throat. Especially within like English classes, history, I think a lot of times, like world history. Oh my gosh, I remember we learned about the Crusades, and I can make a whole video on why the Crusades were justified. Even though I'm not really Catholic myself, I think they were completely justified. We learned about the Crusades, and we learned about the Crusades as if it was a bunch of Christians going out and slaughtering Muslims for no good reason. That's literally at a core surface level. That's how we learned it as, and I don't think it's the opposite. I think it just was a war to reclaim the Holy Land in Jerusalem. As Christians, that's what it was more so about. It wasn't this mindless slaughtering. And we learn about Christianity as kind of like evil, like the Catholic Church was so corrupt. And, I'm not even Catholic, but the Catholic Church was, so corrupt and they had this, and this. We did so much in the Protestant Reformation as if it was this beautiful thing, this beautiful time to be alive. It's nearing the end of the Renaissance, and Martin Luther comes along and changes the world because the Catholic Church was just so evil. The Catholic Church rarely, I really don't think, and I'll look into this more. This, I could be wrong, so I'm going to tread lightly. They rarely did the things how history tells. I think history exaggerates. History classes exaggerate the evils that the Catholic Church committed of just like burning people at the stake all the time. Like, and it villainizes Christianity in general because what is the most influential and biggest institution when it comes to Christianity in the world? The Catholic Church. It is straight up. And the Catholic Church has an overarching influence on how we think about Christianity in general. And so you villainize the Catholic Church and you have villainized Christianity. That's one, I think, solid example of the sort of progressive ideologies that are pushed onto you when you're younger. And I think even though it's feminized, I don't know if it's really a word, um, it's not even the best for women because this isn't how people learn. The memorization, like, you will retain that for the test, sure, but I mean, even bro, ask a former valedictorian when they're 40 years old how much they've truly retained. And unless they're like a PhD in mathematics or something, they probably didn't retain much. Um, it's not people learn from the long run. It's not the type of stuff that people should be learning. This isn't applicable to the real world. And it was hilarious yesterday. I rarely talk with this kid, but he was in my math class, and we were learning about like this kind of unit is like algebra being applied in geometry. There's a lot of that, and the kid asked, he goes, "How do we apply this to? How does this apply to real life?" And it was hilarious. I was like, I wasn't like dying laughing, but I was like, I mean, yeah, like straight up, dude. Like, it's cool to ask that because this kid rarely talks in at least this class. Um, like it was cool to see him just step up and say that people are turning their heads and opening their eyes, I guess is the better way to put it, to the school system. That was really cool, but it's not what people learn. It's not what we should be learning. It doesn't apply to the modern day unless you become like a PhD in math or something. You're probably not going to care that much about the info that you're learning. Look, I am a self-proclaimed nerd, even though I'm not very smart. I like to learn about topics like science, philosophy, things along the lines of that. But I know that in the end, that information isn't really going to apply to my everyday life. I think we need to focus on other topics, other subjects that we can apply to real life. But the issue is that they're not going to financially educate the youth. I think they're never going to because they know that if they do, they can't be controlled. The youth, if they get so, amazingly financially educated, they have a finance class where they're reading, valuable financial books and, financial classics, whatever, they are grade A screwed because people are going to open their eyes. People aren't going to just be in the rat race. So, of course, they're not going to teach that. And they know parents are still going to bring their kids to public school because a lot of parents, sadly, and this isn't to knock on parents, won't, they don't have the money to send their kid to a better institution. They don't have the time to homeschool or anything like that. That's, you know, I think that's why I think we should just reform or try and reform the public school system because look, parents don't just have time to homeschool their kids. Not all parents do. And that's fine. That's expected. We need to work around that as a society. I don't think we can really reform everything and change everything because reality is you know the government controls the public school system. They're not going to want to financially educate kids, but I think we can do some stuff to you know change it for the better, and it's realistic. It's not completely far out from reality. Um, so I guess my next opinion is that school is honestly like a prison. And whether you think I'm being dramatic or not, or whatever, it's honestly true. You have to ask to go to the bathroom, like I said before, which you don't even have to do at most professional work settings. There's fights, and obviously kids get in fights, but there's just like stupid fights. You go in the bathroom and you're getting like chirped at, you know what I mean? Just for, taking a leak. Um, and honestly, you are stuck in a micro society or a microcosm of immature kids. I think now more than ever. Um, people will say that you need to get used to being around these types of people because this is what you're going to have to deal with in everyday life. And I'm going to politely disagree with that and say, no, a lot of these kids, this is sad. This is a sad reality. A lot of these kids that you have to deal with that are really annoying and, blunt honesty, really stupid and don't know what they're doing. And obviously, I'm stupid too. I make stupid decisions all the time, but they can't admit that they're stupid, right? Or they embrace it. You won't have to deal with these kids in everyday life because a lot of these kids are going to be the kids in lower class neighborhoods. Unfortunately, probably some of them will be homeless or bums on the street. And this isn't to knock them. This is the issue with the school system, right? In my opinion, it comes down to that because you spend a third of your day, a third of your childhood really at school. It's a critical part of your childhood more than, really a lot. 8 hours at school, 8 hours at home, 8 hours, you know, um, asleep. And 8 hours at school takes up a pretty big part of that. This is why we need to fix it. But these kids that you're stuck with right now that are annoying, that are rude, brash, I'm not saying all of them are just going to end up being like, guys in the street or in the ghettos. I'm not saying that at all. A lot of these kids turn out to be, great and successful and change when they're older, but a lot of them, you're not going to have to deal with them, dude. You're straight up not going to. If you if you put your nose down in high school and you grind and, you work hard on something you enjoy, if you work on your health, if you have, fun hobbies, if you have a good social life, when you become a grown man, you're going to be so far ahead of the curve. These guys, you're not going to have to see them. You're going to be in a completely different world, honestly. So people who will say like, you know, you're going to have to deal with these guys for life, so get used to it. Of course, there's going to be people that are annoying in every setting, but this level of degeneracy and stupidity only comes not only in teenagers, because I'm a degenerate and I'm stupid too, obviously, right? I think all teenagers are to a certain extent. But that level, where they don't have the guts to admit that they are, really only comes in teenagers and some adults that really aren't that successful anyway. So you want to deal with them if you are. Um, yeah, that's the bulk of my takes. And this is not really a rant, but it sort of is. I think school security and the idea of school security is good, but they have no idea, at least at my school, what they're doing. And, if an authority figure or whatever from my school sees this is a message to you. Get your security together, genuinely. Your security is doing, is catching such futile and such minute acts of misbehavior and acting like they're saving the world when they don't even. Okay, so if they go into the bathroom and they see kids vaping, they tell them to leave, and that's the end of that. The punishment for vaping, I'm pretty sure, is like an automatic, like you're suspended, you're gonna get detention or whatever. They don't even do that because these guys don't want to fill out paperwork. I don't know if they got these guys off the street and put them in a security uniform and said, just go find kids misbehaving. But it's terribly ran. And I'm sure from what I've heard from people who go to other schools, it's the same way. This is not just a crisis or issue in my school. This is everywhere. You guys are dealing with the wrong people. For example, me and my friends were walking fast out of the bathroom. There were kids vaping in there. This was just this past week. Security stops us and goes, why are you guys running out of the bathroom? Okay, reasonable question. Reasonable question. We probably look like idiots, to be honest. Um, and I said, "Oh, there's kids vaping in there." Just divert, like, just completely divert the subject. I don't want to explain why we're walking fast out of the bathroom when I need to go to Canton and we need to get to like another school to class. I don't feel like playing that game. And I was like, "There's kids vaping there. There is." And then security goes, "Oh, well, thanks for stopping us." Like all, sarcastically. And it's like she yells at us, she's like, "Get out of my hallway." And I'm like, who hired you? I mean, genuinely, who hired you? Because you honestly have zero clue how to like manage a situation where, I think like if it came down to it, and you know what I mean, these guys would have no clue how to handle a true dire emergency situation because they can't even handle kids walking fast out of a bathroom when there's 5 minutes left until the lunch bell rings. Like, make some quick inferences. And when a kid tells you there's kids vaping in the bathroom, instead of sitting there yelling at them for another 30 seconds, go to the bathroom and catch the kids vaping in the bathroom that are not only ruining their health, but, you know, they're screwing people over from, being able to even really want to go to the bathroom if they need to because they don't want to go in there and breathe blueberry smoke while they're in there. How about you go handle that? School is a genuinely unhealthy environment, not only because of that, but all the chemicals and all the pesticides they spray across the entire school, like the cheapest they can find, obviously, because it's a public school, and it's disgusting. I remember the first day I came back from Christmas break, the school, the floors were like super shiny, and the school just reeked of chemicals. You could just smell it off of everything. And it's nasty. Who wants to be a part of that? We had two mice in 2 weeks in our biology class, and they're just like roaming around freely. And obviously, okay, that happens, but this is just a common occurrence where it's like, yeah, we're gonna get mice, we're gonna get mice, and no one really does anything about it. Like, how are y'all not going to take some sort of action when it comes to that stuff, which is just nasty because you get literally, my biology teacher has admitted to this. There's like mice poop just kind of across the school. That's disgusting, dude. Really? This is the this is the grade A standard for American public education. My school, according to whatever crappy source, is one of the best in Michigan. I can only imagine how disgusting those lower schools are. And we wonder why our kids today are stupid. We wonder why they're degenerate. If you want to blame it on them, you're missing the bigger picture. Take a look at how society has raised these children throughout their childhood. Maybe you'll realize that their addictions, their problems are really symptoms of a bigger problem. God bless.